Good morning, guys. Good morning. Appreciate you. Thank you for being here. So, talk about some nutty move in Beyond Meat the last few days. Yeah, we should have all just full ported into Beyond Meat. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't know how this company isn't out of business yet. You don't understand the setup in /GC. What don't you understand about it? What was a hard time understanding? No, I don't eat Beyond Meat for the burgers. I shorted Nugget the day of the top. Well, not the day of the top for gold, but kind of the way that I shorted it was, I'll show you guys. So, first of all, I was looking at the daily, and I knew that this was already pretty ridiculous. So, the way I was viewing it was I knew I didn't know if I would be nailing the exact top, but as soon as I saw some weakness come in, I took a starter 3% position of my portfolio, basically. And then I ended up adding a little bit more once it really couldn't take out these highs. And I added some more. And so the way I viewed it was I wasn't using like a price level as a high because there was really nothing there, but I was more so thinking about positioning, and positioning was and has been incredibly crowded. I don't have the most recent data because the government's been shut down. But I was just looking at it as positioning is incredibly crowded to the long side. Sentiment is incredibly bullish to the long side, even though, and here's the thing, guys. I thought gold was buyable here. I was buying gold lower in KGC back in April. So, I was in the metal miners back in April or in May, and I was really bullish. I was really bullish gold when it was breaking out of this 10-year cup and handle down here, right? Which is the 29th and 1st of March 2024. So I was very bullish on gold really early on. So I've had my eyes on gold for a long time. So I've had a good feel for how it trades. You go up 9 weeks in a row. Sentiment is that strong. You get everybody kind of chest pumping. You get Peter Schiff tweeting every 12 minutes about gold. It's like you just intuitively know that you're due for a pull. Like imagine everybody on gold when you've gone this vertical. It's either you've never studied a setup in your life or you're just delusional. Where people are like, oh, 4,300, it's likely it gets to 5,000 first before a pullback. What? So it's supposed to go from 3,400, 33 and a half all the way to 5,000. It's supposed to go 50% before it ever gets a pullback. Like, all right, let's take it easy. So yeah, I shorted Nugget, and then I got kind of lucky where it faded the next day, and then gold was still able to go higher even after Friday. But what wasn't able to go higher was the GDX, and GDX put in this inside day, and I actually added to it. I added to my Nugget position right in here. And then that was it. Then the next day I was, given a gift, and I covered some yesterday at about $136, like right in here. And then, I'll probably be covering another little piece this morning. And then I'm kind of done. I'm done with the trade. I'll be out of half my position and I could just let it work. I might only have a third left after today. I'm not sure. The Koreans are focused on Beyond Meat. Yeah, they're focused on something. And it ain't gold. Yeah, I think CrowdStrike's just a little sloppy. I've got it on my list, on my watch list. I think this is still just a little sloppy, but it is a cup and handle. The IGV ETF's interesting. Zscaler's another one, cup and handle. Yeah, I think the IGV ETF. Talked about this yesterday on the watch list video. So, thoughts on DAL? It's like the only one. It is a clean setup, but it's like the only one within the space. So, I don't know. Yeah, Delta probably can go higher. VRT's interesting this morning. With the gap up on earnings. Not going to be buying gap up on earnings. I got to see if there's, more evidence that names are following through on earnings. So maybe a high volume close. And then GEV. I'd like to see this name stick in there. Beyond Meat, I wouldn't be longing this up here. So but the volume on this thing is nuts. Rambus, that one's been holding up pretty nicely for the semiconductors. Yeah, Tesla on its own earnings, that'll be pretty important. Late stage bull moves for Donut and Beyond Meat. Yeah, it could be. I don't know, because I look at like Microsoft, and this base isn't too bad after earnings. It's just like hung in there pretty well for a full quarter, and it is trying to push a little bit higher. Apple's at an all-time high. You just got to give it credit for being at an all-time high. Nvidia is just hanging out just above the 50 simple moving average. Got to give it credit for that after how big of a move this thing has had. Right? It's not really dying. It's just made a big move up, and now it's really just going sideways. Is it a stage 3 top, or is it getting ready for it to go higher? Nobody knows the answer to that question. Tesla is right there next to an all-time high. I mean, this is, less than 10%. Could be that on earnings this thing gaps up and then goes. Amazon did a really nice job holding on to the 200. Can we reclaim the 50 and reclaim 1010's high? That would be pretty ideal. And then maybe we tighten up and this thing goes to an all-time high. I mean, the MAGS ETF does not look bad. So I don't know. I just don't know. Right? I don't think any of us know. I'm not going to tell you I know when I don't know. None of us know the answer to the question of what the heck's going to happen. So do I back up my trading entry decisions with stats, especially when price tries to reclaim SMAs? How many attempts before a failure success? No, there is no, I don't have hard stats as to how often a break back above a key moving average works. I don't know that anybody does. I haven't seen any studies done on that. But what I try to do is make sure that I'm focused on when I'm taking that kind of setup, how is my group acting that I'm trading, and how is the market acting when I'm trading? So I'm putting odds on my side. But there is no like hard stats that I've ever seen that, buying a reclaim of a 20 or a 50 day works every time, because Sometimes it works and sometimes it fails. And, but I haven't really been taking longs out here, guys. The last long I took was CoreWeave. That didn't work. The long before that was GEV, and that was a break even. And then the trade before that was AVGO, and that didn't work. So really in the last 12 days, I've taken 3 longs, and that hasn't worked. And on the flip side of that, I've taken shorts, right? I've gotten short Rigetti. That's worked beautifully. I've gotten short Nugget. That's worked beautifully. I've gotten short UAMY. That worked perfectly. So, I'm taking the path of least resistance, which was shorting the stocks that were highly overextended. So I don't know. I don't have any stats to, back up buying through a key moving average when I don't really, I wouldn't know how to do that study unless it's just with my own trades, in which case, I could easily look at my, wins and losses, but I'm only right about 35 to 40% of the time anyway. And I still make tons of money. So it's all that matters. Yep, Ethereum was a crowded trade, and that's through COT data, commitment of traders through the CFTC. And just the same way that I said gold was a crowded trade through COT data. So I'm basically, so I'm not just taking the other side of the trade. When you think about the biggest losers in the stock market, they're small and large speculators. So I'm basically waiting until that whole side of the boat gets crowded in terms of positioning. And then I look to take the other side of that trade. When sentiment, and it's typically you want a news failure, but when sentiment gets awfully high, that's when I really start to want to get on the other side of the trade. Do I have a top 5 fintech stocks? The one going up. I don't have a list of my favorite fintech stocks. One day it could be maybe a semiconductor. One day it could be a software stock, whichever one I'm making money in that has the cleanest setup. Those are my favorite. But like actually a favorite, no. How did I get short Rigetti? Yeah. So Rigetti, I actually shorted at $55 on the day it put in its high. I actually covered some. So I shorted here. So I shorted on like a 5-minute opening range break low with a stop at high of day. And then I shorted when this thing was breaking back down right in here. And then that was it. And I did cover some off, literally lows of the day. I want to say $51, 51.05 or something like that, right up against the 5-day. Right, that was it. And then I held through this bounce because my stop was still high of day. And then the very next morning, obviously, as you could see on the daily, it just got crushed. UAMY, very similar. UAMY was effectively identical. So it had gone parabolic at this point, vertical. And then I shorted in this first 5-minute bar, 18.5. And then I shorted a little bit later after you had this pop back up and consolidated and started to break down. I shorted this as well. So that was it. And then I've just been sitting patient, and I had some covers at like $13, I want to say. So some covers on this day down here. And then some covers at $12 down here, if I'm not mistaken. I could look at the time. I'll post it later. Once I'm done with the trade, I'll post them on X as a little thread. And then I've just been sitting in the rest of it. Surprised it's actually even popping up this morning, considering, MP looks like it's trying to roll over some more. AOI reminds me a lot of IoT. It's not, I don't really love it, to be honest with you. AOI, it looks like it's just making its way higher, but it kind of reminds me of an IoT where, it just makes its way higher, but in like the most sloppy way possible. That's kind of what this reminds me of. What do I think of SANA? Nah, there's nothing here. Where's the tightness? The tight doesn't exist on this chart. To offset a short-term pullback, not always. No, if we're like in a fresh, if like we just got out of a market correction, I just try to hold my longs. But like once you get a little extended or I start to get rewarded, here's the important part. Once I start to get rewarded on the short side, the same way I get long using progressive exposure, I do something very similar on the short side where then I take another short and then I take another short and then I take another short. And as long as the market is rewarding that, then I continue to do it, right? So I've gotten rewarded for shorting the stocks that got wildly extended to the upside. And I missed a couple, right? I missed IRIN, I missed IONQ, even though even the first time, right? I shorted IONQ into this extension and I had a $74 short with a $76 stop. And then I covered it right here, 61 and a half. And then I covered it 65 and a half right in here as it took out prior day high. So I should have reshorted it again. Honestly, I should have been shorting like 82s, but, and then yesterday would have been a nice time to cover some off personally, right near the 50-day. But I don't just take shorts to offset or a quote unquote a hedge to offset a potential pullback, right? I'm okay with pullbacks. It's just when the market gets very stretched to the upside and I'm seeing a lack of setups, then that's when I start to think about a hedge. Do I watch my swing positions on an intraday basis? And would you close your swing position same day it's open if it does not behave properly? Of course. Yeah. Oftentimes my stop is low of day. When I go to buy something, my stop is low of day. So if it breaks low of day, I'm out. How do I decide on my short entry? Well, it's like a first red day setup. Sometimes you'll get like an ugly crack right in the morning and you could break like a pre-market low. Sometimes you'll break above prior day high and then you'll break back through prior day low or prior day high, and I could short against that prior day high. Other times you'll break VWAP, you'll go and retest VWAP, and then you'll stay heavy there because it's trying to go lower and there are sellers, and I'll short against VWAP. Other times, it'll break right in the morning and then try to retest and go green, and it'll fail at that red to green spot. So there are multiple ways to get involved, but really, kind of thinking about extension from the 50 and then, judging price action as it's happening. And then not getting too aggressive on my first entry, but adding to my winner, right? That's the important part. I'm not just like adding more and more and more and more and more to my short as it's going up. I'm like taking my starter and I know exactly where I'm going to leave if I'm wrong. I have an expectation for the stock because I think we've hit near the top, right? And then once I'm being proven right, I add some more lower, right? After I'm already correct and I'm adding to it as I'm right. So it's a good way to think about shorting. Really even think about longing. Like I don't ever buy more as it's going down and I'm wrong. I buy more as it's going up and I'm right. VRT is going up now. Would you enter today? No, I would rather wait for like a high volume close setup. I'm not going to be buying any of these earnings gap ups. And not an ugly little bull flag. It actually looks pretty decent. But yeah, I won't be adding to this. About 6 times its ATR from the 50. Not bad, but The entry really on this thing was on 9:30 or on 10:1. There is no real entry here at the moment. A high volume close setup. ERJ is nice. I like their private jets. Believe it or not. Yeah, ERJ is nice. Yeah, I like Palantir's flag. The real question becomes, is Palantir a late stage base? Or, is Palantir prepared and ready to go higher, over that 190? We're getting closer and closer to earnings on 11/3, so we got to get going here pretty soon. Potential swing trade opportunity for NVIDIA today. It's possible. I talked about this on last night's Watchlist video. NVIDIA has to hold the 50. If we don't hold the 50, then, and we take out, maybe prior day low, this thing could start to wash out, pretty hard. Maybe not super hard, but, maybe back down to like 170-ish. I'm not sure how this one's going to play out, but either we hold the 50 and we start to bounce, or we lose the 50 and we start to roll over, in which case, the market will act pretty weak. Thoughts on Intel? It has earnings coming up. This one's also on my list, and you're going to want to get through earnings. So you're going to want to get through earnings, and then we'll figure out what's going on. What was my risk to reward ratio? So I talk about risk to reward all the time. Here's the reality as a swing trader. You don't know your RR because you don't know your potential reward. That's just the reality. I only ever know my risk. And the reason I don't know my potential reward, because I don't set targets. Like when I go to buy something as a long, I don't have a target of where I'll leave. I just sit there if it's not doing anything wrong. Like when I bought ARK, for instance, I never knew that I would be in it for 4 months. I never knew. I knew that when I bought it this day, it looked really good. It was back above the 200, and there was a lot of stocks within our ETF which are acting super well. And then all of a sudden, you get a small little trim into the push, and then you're just sitting here and sitting here and sitting here. You're like, holy cow, this thing's acting amazing. And you start to widen out your stop, and you're just going to be patient with it. And this has done nothing wrong. So I'm still just sitting here so long as it's above the 50-day. And that's it. So like, I don't ever really know my risk to reward on my shorts or my longs because I don't keep price targets. How do I know ARK doesn't end up going to 150? I want to be in that. Not often. So I've talked about this quite a bit before during the trading days, and this is kind of my answer. So, and this is a good question. You mentioned I don't hold on to losers. So if I enter a trade, but it's not up for the day, but your stop has not been hit, do you close your trade? There have been instances when a stock doesn't hold up well for the day and my stop isn't hit, and I end up regretting it because low of day isn't hit. So there are moments when you just need to respect your stop. That's the most important part. There are days, and oftentimes this has a lot to do with the market that you're in. If your stock is acting like crap, but the market's pushing higher, then you're in a stock that's showing relative weakness for the day. On the flip side of that, if the market's coming lower, you buy a stock that was breaking out early in the morning when the market was acting okay, and then all of a sudden the market starts to act poorly, but your stock holds up pretty well, then this is, how I determine, if my stock is showing some relative strength, in which case I want to sit in it. Let me do something really quickly. Um, what would be my assessment on CAN, and light? Nope, CAN is kind of disgusting here. No real setup, and light looks a whole lot better because I know this one. I've been staring at it for days. Yeah, LIT doesn't look bad. FTK very thin. Do I hold my shorts for just hours or days mostly? I've been in my shorts for days now. So like Nugget, I shorted, I don't know what day this was, last Thursday, 10/16. So I've been in this one for a few days. I've been in Rigetti since 55. So that's for a few days now. I've been in UAMY for days now since the 14th. So it depends. But at this point, I've trimmed all of them. Yeah, it's very easy to stay off the buy button right now. Very, very easy. What's my approach with Rocket Lab considering the close under the 10 yesterday? Oh, well, we have it very close to the same spot on Rocket Lab. That's actually when I first bought my Rocket Lab. I wouldn't. So here's the thing. I don't just use an ascending moving average. I actually think about price structure a whole lot more. So look at how this thing has actually been building higher lows. So when this thing came down and it was above the 10, you now have this low, right? Which is 62.19. Then it comes down again and it's 63.70. And now you come down one more time, right? And so as long as it's above that 63.70 spot, I think it's fine. And then below that 63.70 spot, maybe you reduce a little bit more because if it loses that, it could easily go back down to the 20-day. But ideally, you trim another little piece. At least that's how I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to allow this 20-day to catch up and then use this 20, right? Because really, no matter what happens, even if I end up getting stopped out when a close below the 20, it won't be for a few days, potentially. And, it'll still be a 20 something percent winner. And I did a pretty nice job trimming into this strength. I want to say here or here, actually. I'd have to look at my prints, but. No, this is still just it needs more momentum to the upside. The 200 days flattening, it's doing a nice job kind of hanging out above there, but nothing super impressive. How do I decide my low of the day? Is it the lowest point of the 5-minute bar, 30-minute bar? It's normally the low of the day on the daily candlestick. So if I buy like a 5-minute opening range break, it'll be the low of the 5-minute bar. of not that 5-minute bar, of the low that's printed that day. So sometimes what'll happen is you'll get like a 5-minute bar, you'll then start to drop and you'll put in your low and then you'll turn back up. I buy that 5-minute opening range break and I set my stop at that low of the day, literally. Do I have an indicator of when something will fall through a moving average? No. ATR extension and using COT data to my advantage, is kind of what I determined to, think we were close to the highs on, the names that I've shorted. How to explain my work to civilians? It's a great question. I don't know, man. I'm a swing trader. Yeah, WDC's been showing a little bit of weakness. Nothing too crazy, but yeah, I would suspect that this thing either needs a bigger base or we're going to pull back a little steeper. STX might be in the same boat. I mean, this was obnoxious at one point. You're looking at this and you're just like, what the hell is going on here? Yes, I covered a piece of Nugget yesterday, and I literally just covered some more here in pre-market. So I'm down to half of my original position. Do I know the science of why a high volume close works? Really, I would imagine that because that's where institutions close price and that's where they are looking to continue to accumulate. Like they are just looking to accumulate. I don't know that there's a science behind it, but you're just following in the footsteps of institutions. Why only 720p videos? I don't know, man. I might need a better camera. No, I actually talked about this last night. I actually think that when I look at an iron, when I look at a hut, when I look at a Rigetti, when I look at an IONQ, when I look at a Clean Spark, when I look at any like the metals names like UAMY or USAR, I believe that all of those names have hit their high for this year. So can they go higher next year? It's possible, but I would almost 100% confidently say that the high of 74.15 will be the high for this year on iron, and we will not go any higher. 2022 was fine, in particular in the beginning of the year. It was really fine in the beginning of the year because I traded energy, and it was great at the end of the year because I got long NVIDIA. Everything in the middle was no fun. I have trimmed Tesla. I have not sold it. I think ARM is a big base, but I don't really have a clean way to enter it at the moment. A little bit sloppy here. A little bit sloppy. I don't have a way. Yeah, Galaxy, not bad. I've got my eye on it. I want to know if, these earnings winners got some juice in them. So I'm watching all the earnings winners. What percent do I trim? That's I don't think about percentages like that because every stock moves a different percent amount per day, right? So if I were to just tell you like I trim everything at 10%, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a stock that moves 10% per day. Pack B. Nope, this can't do it. Pack B trades $12 million a day. You should avoid that one entirely. And it's a biotech, What the hell is this? Yeah, both of these look absolutely terrible, Ivan. With all due respect, these are hot garbage. Fine. Man, I wish price would just flatten out a little bit more here. I don't know that the TER long yesterday made sense. I don't know that I'm into buying any longs at the moment, so long as we're below 1010's high, right? Otherwise, it's just chop, right? You look at this and it's just chopping here. So I don't know. Needs to take out 1010's high. Stocks need to take out that high. Otherwise, you're just within a range. Most of the times it's to the exact penny, but there are moments where I'll give it, a few extra moments to work. PBI looks good. Yeah, this actually doesn't look that bad. A little thin, and a little slow. What's the play with BYND? Let it squeeze, and then it's probably a short to bankruptcy. I just think, the group is weakening just a little bit, right? You look at ASTS, and this one's been coming down for a little bit. So this one isn't really helping at the moment, right? It peaked, and then you'll notice that they peaked right around the same time. FTAI, it's not bad. A little bit longer, and maybe we'll have like a flat base breakout in a few weeks, or maybe something on earnings. I'm assuming earnings are right around the corner. Yeah, you just said it, close to earnings. Yeah, probably. What are my thoughts on SANA? No, I already looked at this one. Garbage. Let it tighten up. It's thin. It moves way too fast. There's no clean setup. There's no tightness. There's nothing here. It's just going up, which is fine. Going up is a good thing, but you need to be able to get long safely. STRL, now that's a nice base. Yeah, but a little longer. But it is, just building a series of higher lows. I don't know that I love it just yet, but a little longer. How do I know the right time to enter? That's a great question. I do my best to make sure that I align my buys out of a tight area with the market and my group acting well. That's the important part. So let's just say a stock has a pretty tight entry. Let's just say NVIDIA, for whatever reason, can take out prior day high, and the NASDAQ's acting really well today, and a bunch of other mega caps are acting well today. Well, I can buy it over a prior day high and set my stop at today's low of day. Why? Because the NASDAQ's acting well, and so are a bunch of other mega caps. And even better still, how are the other semiconductors acting? So I try to make sure that I align myself, with my group and the stocks acting well within the group. How do I determine if a trade is crowded in COT data? I look at where the small and large speculators are piled in. So, and I do my best to do the exact opposite of those people, because they're the ones historically who lose the most amount of money. Thoughts on Robinhood? It just needs to, finish building out a base here. I don't think it's doing anything wrong. I just don't think it's doing anything right. So it needs to tighten up a little bit more. Build out the right-hand side of the base. Yeah, PDD not bad. Yeah, PDD not bad. PDD not bad, which I don't know that I'm not a buyer of it just yet. And BABA maybe back over the 20-day, whenever that happens. Does M look good? You know, these clothing names have been hanging in there. Yeah, M's starting to show some life. The other one that's showing some recent life is something like this Boot Barn. You got me. I don't know why Boot Barn would be at an all-time high, but here we are. This TJ Maxx is another one that's holding in there, but it's just way too slow. And the Zoomies, I think, looks pretty good. Brought me back to my high school days, but I don't really, I can't really trade this because it's super thin. Can I explain more about stock price needing to take out the 10-10 highs? Well, look, if you can't, okay, let's look at Palantir, for example. Okay. This thing, the high of 10-10, October 10th, when Trump spoke about the China tariffs, the market got smoked that day. Well, the high here is 187.10 and the low is 173.53. Price has effectively sat within that range this entire time. I don't want to trade Palantir in here. This would drive me fucking insane. So at the very least, you need to get out over 10-10's high, and then you're now getting out of the chop zone, right? Yeah, Dell is interesting. Yeah, Dell is interesting. My thoughts on Uber, a super choppy name. Super, super choppy. I don't see why AMD can't continue higher. I just find it hard to think it can continue higher, without pulling back some and then building out a new base. Like, I don't necessarily love the way it looks here, but I'm not going to say that it's topping out when it's in a clear uptrend. I mean, the uptrend is clear as day. TMDX looks good. They've got earnings in a week. Yeah, TMDX does look really good, and earnings in a week. So on the 29th, if I'm not mistaken. Thoughts on Lyft? It's not bad. It's holding on to the 50-day. I don't know if I see anything here that I love just yet, but I'll tell you what, I like that it's building higher lows. I like that it's above the 50-day. I like, it's just, once again, it's going to have to take out this ugly little down bar. But if we can do that, then maybe we'll have some kind of a low cheat setup coming through here in a few days. Not bad. And then ZM. I don't know that it's buyable here, but I like that it's back above all key moving averages. I like that it held the 200. Maybe look for a tight spot. So doesn't look that bad. Yeah, OUST. This one's been, hanging in there pretty well. Obviously, this is super nasty price action, but it's doing a nice job just building out again. More sideways would be good. I like to take, if I own things from much lower, I'll just hold on to them. But I like to take some of my positions after earnings, not into earnings, because then it's just gambling, right? Then you can get caught in a Netflix or you can get caught in, ISRG. You just don't know which direction they're going to go. No, it's not wait for a pullback. It's wait for a high volume close. You don't need to wait for a pullback. You need to wait for a high volume close. I think that's the way. Microsoft, nice steady trend. Frog, I don't hate. This thing looks pretty decent, actually. It's not my favorite price action, but it's hanging in there. No, CDTX in here was tightening. It's nice sideways price action. Up here, I don't know about this one. Not up here. We're a little bit extended from the 50-day. NVT, yeah, this one's a little slow. Sub 3% per day. Yeah, it's getting tight, but it's sub 3% per day. Like, it's slow. It's very, very slow. All right, guys. As always, love talking to you guys. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. You guys have an awesome rest of your trading day. Don't do anything too crazy out there. We are in the middle of earnings season, so just be patient. Let things set up. Let things, kind of show their hands. Are we going to have follow through in an ISRG and a General Motors? Is a Netflix going to get bought up? Is a General Motors going to get sold off? And is a Netflix going to follow through to the downside? Those are just a bunch of unanswered questions that we just don't know. So, kind of being patient for us to figure that out, I think is the right thing to do. Be patient. And I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Yep. Thanks for being here, guys. Later.